We live our lives engaged in a daily electromagnetic dance with our planet. Earth is hardly a stable world. In fact, it pulses every day with powerful rhythms of electrical and magnetic force, and so do we. Earth produces a magnetic field much like a bar magnet. Any compass needle tells us that the north pole of our Earth magnet is near the physical North Pole, which is one end of the axis on which our planet rotates. Life on Earth would be impossible without this field, called geomagnetic field. The geomagnetic field deflects the solar wind, deadly blasts of electrically charged high-energy particles from the sun. Mars lacks a magnetic field, causing its surface to be hostile to life. But the geomagnetic field takes a beating doing its job. The field is depressed when struck by gusts of solar wind, much like a warrior whose shield deflects a mighty enemy sword strike but recoils in the process. An aurora can be produced by an unusually powerful solar gust and is roughly analogous to the ringing of the shield under a particularly vicious blow. During the northern lights, air molecules at the upper edge of the atmosphere are so excited by the impact of solar wind that they glow. When our part of our Earth rotates into sunlight at dawn, the geomagnetic field recoils from the impact of solar wind, and this affects the field lines. Field lines can be thought of as linear incarnations of the magnetic field. Sprinkle iron filings on a piece of paper above a magnet, you will watch the filings arrange themselves along these invisible lines of force. At dawn, the magnetic field lines shrink, which makes them stronger. That means that the strength of the geomagnetic field running through the land, our homes, our bodies, and our brains surges each dawn. Conversely, at night, the geomagnetic field lines are no longer being compressed by solar wind, and they gradually stretch into a long tail emanating from the dark side of the planet in a pattern reminiscent of a comet. This lengthening of the field lines weakens them. The end result of this is that the geomagnetic field weakens at night, only to come roaring back quickly as dawn approaches. There are places where the local geology makes this effect stronger than at others due to the principles of electromagnetism. Electromagnetism is a single word for a reason. Magnetism and electrical force are inextricable twins. A moving electrical current generates a magnetic field, and a changing magnetic field generates electrical current in anything present that will conduct it. This is how our electrical power plants work. Physical force from coal, oil, or falling water moves a mass of copper wires past a huge magnet, and an electrical current is generated. This is the principle of physics known as induction. All right, that was a little excerpt of this book that I've read called Seed of Knowledge, Stone of Plenty, and it's a book about understanding the lost technology of ancient megalithic builders. It's a great read and really sheds light on what our ancients were really doing. He doesn't really go into depth about how it was built. He does give some theories which are really interesting. You know, are feasibly done with ancient people, and but he's more focused on the electrical component of the sun and earth connection and how the fields can help grow food. And it's a good read. I mean, he explains how the air is positively charged and the ground is mostly negative. It does flip in certain areas due to discounted points, which maybe I'll explain later. But pretty much trying to have right here it says figure two. Any protrusion on the Earth's surface concentrates the positive electric field lines on the atmosphere at the top. Likewise, negative charge from the entire ground area of the base is concentrated in the smaller area of the top. So you try to use these fields in the morning, and these megalithic structures that were built were there to harness the effect and create fertility for the land. It helped grow crops. It helped fortify seeds. There's some information here that I go right here. This is what the magnetism does to the seeds right here. Very low energy electrons running through the air at 1/millionth of an amp coat the seed. As they are absorbed into the cell, they get absorbed as well into the mitochondria, where they are known to disrupt the oxygen processing in a way that increases the production of our free radicals. Then the cell's antioxidant defense get involved. In the end, you end up with a cell that can handle just about anything better. And the reason why he says this works is that um, a lot of farmers will use this as an example. Farmers will cold harden their plants before they actually put them out. They'll put them on a windowsill, and it will let the plant get used to the cold and fortify it for the whole season, so it can handle stresses. And so these electrical fields will electrify your whole body and make it run better, more efficient. And if you're eating food where the seeds are electrified, then your own mitochondria, because you're eating that DNA that was imprinted into the cell, so it's going to help your cells too. So it's like, you start the small food chain, and then you can even use it on animals too. I'm sure it's beneficial as well. And I mean, I'll keep going with this. There's people who tend to be sensitive. And then one of these pages, he explains in the figure 3, Andre Apostol's sensitive volunteer showed muscle contractions when he walked over a cave at Cave of the Mounds National Natural Landmark, Wisconsin. The spot naturally had weaker gravity, which he shows in a little graph here. Apostol relates that shamanic apprentices were required to be able to locate caves blindfolded. This is another example of how ancient peoples may have selected sites with unusual geophysical properties. All right, so these geophysical properties are points of this continent where water meets dry. And he's saying that people can feel it. So society back then would probably have, you'd say, leaders of the tribe that can feel these, and they would plot out spaces that these existed, because their head will, their body will have muscle contractions, like your eyes will flutter. It happens to me a lot. I'll be running in high energy spots, and like my head feels like it's getting shaked, or like my muscles will twitch. They will. It happens a lot. And I think everyone can tap into it. It's just it takes practice. And with our current medical system pushing pharmaceuticals and food that isn't really good, and a lot of people going away from carnivore diets with all sorts of things that you need for your brain. So if that stuff isn't working, you're really not going to feel it. And if you don't know that these things exist, then you might even think that it's like anxiety. So you might be taking other things. And I mean, that's a whole other subject, but I mean, it's part of the problem too. That's why people can't feel these things. Um, so people can feel it. And shamans, there's a story in this book where that shamans would take people up to this place in Arizona, and like at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and they would do their rituals, and people would heal themselves from alcoholism. It's in the book if you want to read it. This book is online. I'll put a link on the bottom for you guys to go check it out. It's awesome. This was expensive, and it was like 120 bucks for this book. And I thought it was worth it. I saw that the publisher was upset that people were doing this and that they were selling the books under his nose. And I'm like, well, it's the case, but the online version doesn't have the locations. There's actually locations all over America that he went to, that he put the latitude and longitude coordinates into it. So I mean, I'm hoping in the summertime, me and my brother will go. I'll have a camera too to tape all this. I'm not sure if I'll bring it in because it might break. Because he said that some of his instruments did stop working, and well, I mean, I don't want my shit to stop working. So, um, so let's see here. So yeah, there's some photos of showing how the wind electrifies the air, and caves will harbor this electrical field, and it will cause these ions to create electricity in the cave. He said that you would feel effects. And in this figure, it says typical arrangements of electrical air molecules inside a Native American rock chamber. Heavier positively charged ions sink to the floor, while lighter negatively charged ions rise. This separation of charge sets up a measurable pulsing within the airspace of the chamber. I'll do a better video someday, but I want to get this information out. So that's what that looks like. It's like so much great information, and he's got contour maps of the electrical. He used some tools here. I'll explain to you what the tools he used. But that's an electrical contour map of the pyramid structure, a magnetic contour map of the Great Mound Center at the Native American complex at Chipkoye. I might butcher some of these cities. I'm sorry. Illinois. Mounds. This is in Illinois. Mounds are placed on positive magnetic anomalies and laid out on axis of 53,000 gamma's magnetic field strength. The giant central mound, the biggest in the U.S., was placed on the edge of greatest transition by the former riverbank. And the tools that he used, let's see, where is it? It's like do-it-yourself appendix. I thought I marked it right here. So this is the tools he used. 3 categories. Ground electrodes. These also include a long length of wire and a voltmeter, which is capable of registering millivolts of DC charge. The entire assemblage is quite reasonable in cost, probably under $200. He uses a Fluxgate magnetometer, measures the z-axis of the geomagnetic field only. This is the most pertinent of the x, y, and z axes. Such models are available for around $4,000 or less. I mean, if there's any scientists out there that want to do this, please just. I would be really interested in doing this, finding these and building these structures to help with farming and raising livestock. I mean, these fields will strengthen mitochondria and they will allow animals to grow better. Like they're more healthier and they're happier. So if you have more happier livestock, you don't even need to be giving them vaccines or pesticides, and like that will only make us stronger and smarter, and that will be able to make us connect even more, clean our chakras even more, and really have a society that we all wish to have. Like these are the tools right here, and it's amazing that we can do this in our mind. But you need proof, and you need to lay out contour maps are really important. So I can see why these instruments are important. But it's amazing that we did this with our own minds. Like in this book, he actually explains that shamans will use mushrooms, for they call it quest seeking, and they would try to find these discontinent points when they were tripping on mushrooms. Which, I mean, I can totally see that being the case because you see all kinds of stuff when you're under psychosis, like psychedelics. And there's a book that I read from Mark Gover who explains that it'll shut down certain parts of the brain to allow energy to come in that we can't really see. And if you can relay those images to people and actually have them have an effect, then you know that you're doing something right. And so there would be communities of people that can just do this. But these tools are really good. And let's see here, he uses electrostatic voltmeter. This unit that measures electric charge in the air or on objects. It can be used while walking around a site. You can also stand still and sometimes watch the readings change. Gusts of wind deliver air that is more ionized. Yeah, so like they call it plasma when air is charged with electrons. So that's what it's measuring. One important aspect is not to wear clothing made of synthetic fibers, silk or wool, as a cloth rubbing against itself will produce electrostatic charge that can register on the meter. Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know about that either. But yeah, so these are tools that he used. So he's not bullshitting at all. He like it's a real scientific. It's like a scientific journal, and he's got all kinds of stuff in this book. I really you can check it online. I mean, like he's got Stonehenge here, the electrical resistivity map of the ground at Stonehenge. You know, it's amazing, and like this should just be general knowledge. This isn't mystery anymore. But he said that people would put seeds in the middle here, and it would give them the charge that they needed for their plants, and then they would grow it. They would put it in the ground, and it would fortify it against stressors, like say the ground's too wet or you get into famine. This, you would still yield good amount of food even if you didn't have as much, and that's why it was so important to do this. We don't know why people stop. He's got some theories like fertilizer and crop rotation. People stopped doing this, but I mean, it should have kept because maybe people didn't really understand why it was so important, and because it was easier to do, maybe they stopped. I don't know, but I'm here to explain, try to understand why these pyramids are here and these megalithic structures are here. And this book does a good job at really establishing, a basis of what you're looking for here. Oh yeah, Salisbury Hill talks about there was like three phases of construction, and that was to help plant and accentuate the field so they yield more crops. Um, he's got locations on here, and his conclusions. I guess I'll read some of his conclusions. I'll wrap this up. Um, these earth and stone fertility generators worked. You can test some of them yourself. Without fertilizer or crop rotation, the ancient engineers managed to not only feed a mushroom population, but to produce such a surplus as to grow rich enough to import luxury goods. When Pizarro reached Peru, he reported that the Inca were such successful food producers, even in their challenging terrain, that at any one time they had on hand enough stored grain to feed their population of millions for 5 years. In the year 1999, by contrast, when a late northern hemisphere harvest was finally reaped, the grain reserve on the modern world were down to a mere 18 days. So he goes into review. I'll read some of this because it's just hard to like go through all this information. So I'll give you some of the conclusions, and then if you want to check it out, read the book. Like it really opened me up, and it stopped with the mysticism of what's really going on. Like you can use the energies connect to these higher vibratorials, and it like heals your soul. So like I think people just these powers to take advantage of that, and they don't really tell people what it really comes from, and that causes all kinds of confusion. And if we can't get this story straight of what this really is, then we're all going to be fighting over what it what it can do for us. It's so this is what he says. Um, First high civilization of the Americans, the Olmec of Mexico, built earthen mounds and pyramids with well-engineered electrical characteristics. Villages with a mound enjoyed a better standard of living than otherwise identical villagers nearby. The last pyramid of Olmec was the first of the Maya, the lost world pyramid of Tikal, Guatemala. At the pyramid, we measured tremendous surges of electrical ground current and airborne electrical charge in hours bracketing dawn. Local Mayan corn maize seed that we placed atop the pyramid during these electrical surges displayed tremendously increased germination and growth. The stronger the electrical activity on a given day, the greater the growth improvement. Seed was not improved when placed atop later pyramids, which are known to have built as political monuments, and which had no electrical activity. Mayans today still place their seed atop certain pyramids at dawn and teach that plant growth is improved above the same kinds of geological structures that generate such electrical forces. Modern seed treatments using artificial versions of these natural forces are known to produce similar kinds of growth improvements. I've seen some studies that say that too, including higher yields. This has been confirmed dozens of times by universities and agricultural organizations. The degree of improvement is highest with the kind of stressful growing conditions and relatively poor seed quality that typified the agriculture of the megalithic builders. These kinds of energies are generated naturally everywhere, every day, by well-known forces of the Earth, but they are magnified at some locations by certain geological structures called conductivity discontinuities. That's what I was explaining about earlier. Con- Consistently throughout history and all over the world, giant structures of earth and stone were built atop such conductivity discontinuities. Humans are sensitive to these forces. I read you that figure 3, and some humans are capable of sensing them consistently. These forces have been used by pre-agricultural societies for vision quests. We have personally documented this use in contemporary Native American setting. Mushrooms across Europe are substantially more prolific atop such geology. Ancient shamans frequently hunted mushrooms for their own vision quests. This is therefore a likely connection that would have been observed between these locations and improved plant growth. The Native Americans, mound builders of North America, were the cultural descendants of the Olmec and Maya. They located earthen mounds and pyramids atop magnetic anomalies and at a conductivity discontinuities where usually strong electrical ground currents are generated, all confirmed in direct measurements by us. Seed left atop mounds during powerful energy surges have shown dramatic improvements in growth. These mounds can be visited today across most of the South and Midwest. See Appendix 1 for locations and directions. And he's got tons of locations in here that you can look up. And there's some actually in my area. And I'm hoping to go look and I'll videotape it. So, in the last of the mound using societies in North America, farmers would not dream of planting their seeds without first taking to the top of mounds for certain blessings. So there's certain blessings were the ionizations of the seeds. And these Native Americans continue this practice, and that's why there's so much here. Rock chambers here it is. Rock chambers throughout the northeastern United States were built atop magnetic anomalies at conductivity discontinuities, just like the mounds. We spent years measuring electric charge separation inside these chambers and improved growth from maize, wheat, and bean seeds left inside during days with electrical charge, as compared to control seeds left outside. Results met scientific standards for high statistical significance. The biochemical changes inside this seed have been found to be the same kinds of biochemical changes found inside seed treated with today's modern laboratory versions of these energies. Let's just start a company making this stuff. Let's see. 9 samples of corn seed, a variety grown by Native Americans from 700 AD onward, was placed inside 3 different rock chambers for varying amounts of time. then planted and grown out organically. When compared to 9 plots of controlled corn kept outside the chamber or at home in the laboratory, the chamber-exposed seed produced, on average, double or triple the yield of plots of control seed. Oh yeah, and stuff about Carnac, France, if you're familiar with any of the stones there. Many thousands of standing stones around Carnac, France were placed solely at the border of zones of differing magnetic strength and seismic activity. Numerous series of enormous stone chambers were placed one after another precisely above invisible fault lines. Measurements of the type we have taken at megalithic structures were carefully performed by a Belgian engineer over a 30-year period, with results strikingly similar to ours, showing magnetic and electrical variations of similar magnitude. It's funny. There was a Belgian scientist that I just read about. I think I posted this Haley girl. I wonder if that's her. She works for the Belgian government. uh, I guess it's all tied together. See, where was I? Man, I just kind of lost my point. Were taken in megalithic structures were carefully performed by a Belgian engineer over a 30-year period, with results strikingly similar to ours. All these structures were erected only after a flood crisis was on hand, starting 6,700 years ago, more than 2,000 years before the existence of the pyramids of Egypt. All right, he also says like people do this because a lot of them face agricultural crises like drought, famine. So they're looking for ways to increase energy in the air so the plants can grow. There's like so many purposes, and it also probably heal your mind. It does so much stuff for you. In England, we measured the effectiveness of henges at concentrating electrical ground currents by their placement, their design, and their construction. Sited on the same types of geology we have seen elsewhere, we saw numerous archaeological finds where seed had been brought to these henges. Stonehenge was finally abandoned after 2,000 years of use, only when fertilizer and crop rotation were introduced, therefore allowing farmers to multiply their yields without carrying seed to henges. So I guess you know what kind of parties they had there. All the markets and stuff were set up, and like all this is lost. It's amazing. And he talks about Egypt. I guess I'll write this too. I'll read this too. While the situation in Egypt was somewhat unique, we still saw all the same factors in place that we have seen elsewhere: famine, electrically active geological and atmospheric conditions, harnessing of these energies in the matter that could have helped relieve the famine, and the chronology of building successive pyramids alongside and upwind of the new farming regions as they opened up. See how these energies could first have come to the attention of Imhotep, the first architect and chief engineer of the giant pyramids, in the temple at Heliopolis, where he was also head priest, and we saw how these energies have manifested themselves at the same location in modern times before tens of thousands of witnesses in the form of glowing balls of light resulting from brush discharge. We began the chapter with the account of an early scientific pioneer of electricity experiencing powerful electric charges atop the Great Pyramids at Giza. And finally, we saw how every aspect of the design of the giant pyramids, from the building materials for each part, to the fitting of the casement stones, to the air shaft and chambers, might well have functioned to efficiently collect, concentrate, and harness these energies to ionize air and produce airborne nitrogen fertilizer to the farms downwind at the same time of year and time in history when it was both possible and urgently needed. Anyone who wants to obtain instruments similar to these we use, see Appendix 2. See, this is. We hope that you may come to share the new outlook to our. Okay. So that was interesting. That was his conclusion. And he goes into depth about the pyramids and why they were built. The Nile River wasn't flooding anymore. And he's got a bunch of photos of stuff, you know, it's really nice. He actually went to everywhere, you know, this is his own research, and it's quite amazing. Just like a photo of an orb, you call on camera. So if anyone's interested in this book, um, here's the back of the book. I guess I'll read the bottom here. Facts point to a fascinating new theory. Megalithic construction began at each site during agricultural crisis when famine loomed. Long-term prosperity followed. Mayan farmers continue to bring seeds to the top of certain pyramids in Guatemala. Seeds hardened at these ancient structures today yield double or triple the amount produced from untreated seeds. Electromagnetic anomalies reacted in lab settings have been shown to reliably increase the yield of seeds. So, this is my little synopsis of this book. It can lead you some really good avenues of thought and really coincides with the electric universe theory. And it just makes a lot of sense. You know, if I can feel these energies and these crystals, you know, the piezoelectric effect is very real. You know, and if they built these pyramids with quartz infused limestone and stuff, you know, it would just vibrate at like this intense frequency. And you know, it's all coming together, and we will all be free because we will finally harness this in a modern way and create this society that we have been longing for so long. All right. Well, have a good night.